now, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, is introducing a legal requirement from today for all teachers, child carers and health professionals to report if they know a child is being sexually abused. The idea of this is that, well, you have to speak out. You can't just sort of, well, just try and ignore it and pretend it's not happening, given the huge scale of sexual abuse we've seen in care homes, in places like Rochdale with grooming gangs, with children going to the hospitals, going to the police, going elsewhere, and schools, and nothing being done. But is this really going to make any difference? Joining me right now is Peter Garsden. He's a solicitor and president of the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. Thank you so much for joining us, Peter.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Now, a lot of people have been calling for this sort of rule to be brought in, this sort of duty of care, that it's simply not good enough to not do anything if you know that a child is being abused. But already some critics have said, well, you often don't know, it's not like you've not witnessed the abuse. A child hasn't said categorically, this person is sexually abusing me. Often it is something you suspect. A child turns up to A&E who is pregnant, a child who's clearly showing signs of abuse turning up in the classroom, but you don't know for sure. Children often deny it. In that case, that gives teachers, healthcare professionals, social service, it gives them a cop-out. Is this law going far enough?
Well, no, it isn't. I've been campaigning for mandatory reporting now for many years, and frequent attempts to bring it into force have failed. Finally, the Independent Inquiry of Child Sexual Abusers made the recommendation that it be brought into force, but we have always said that the test has to be not knowing, because that happens very rarely, but knowing or suspecting that child abuse has taken place. Often children try to inform those in the childcare arena that somebody has interfered with them, but they don't come out specifically and say that it has actually taken place. A reasonable professional would know that that's what they were hinting at and should do something about it.
Yeah, and it does
often
just have that get-out clause, doesn't it? But I suppose whenever we've covered any of these stories, whether it's what's happening, in the Catholic Church or the Church of England, whether it's happened in, in care homes, we saw on this huge scale with paedophiles, basically just pretty much all of the staff in some care homes abusing children. What's happened, the grooming gangs, the failures of police, of social services, on a grand scale to do anything. The thing that I think is utterly perplexing and bewildering to, I'm sure you, me, and our audience watching and listening right now is why people wouldn't speak up. What is it, if you suspect as a teacher or a healthcare professional, in Rochdale and Rotherham, you have, 13, 14-year-old girls white girls being brought in by a man in his 50s who's Asian, who's clearly not a relative, who's pregnant for the 4th time, being brought in for an abortion. And, why wouldn't you report that? Why wouldn't you suspect something going on? What stops people from doing it right now?
Well, I think it's important to underline that this is only for people in the childcare arena, i.e. looking after children. So the obvious example where this doesn't happen are expensive private schools, public schools, where there have been a number of scandals. And it's where the reputation of the school comes before the obligation to report that the abuse has taken place.
But we've seen that in the church as well, haven't we?
We have indeed. And where if you report, it will result in a massive scandal and the damage of the logo or the brand of the school, that sometimes takes precedence to notifying the authorities. Often junior teachers, for example, fear loss of their job, as do junior social workers, if they blow the whistle. And that's why there are legal protections for whistleblowers. But this goes one step further and says that if you do not report and you know it has taken place, then you commit an offence. But of course, we want that diluting to knowing or suspecting.
Indeed. And this is the thing, they basically lose out their, if it was proven that you hadn't spoken out when you had a reasonable knowledge that this was happening, that you would then, lose your right to work in this field and could face prosecution and go to jail. And I think that's where we need to get to, where people, you know, they're weighing up their options. But even the whistleblower protection laws we've seen across the board, whether it's in government, whether it's in military, whether it's in, you know, social care or teaching, you know, people might not be sacked, but their lives are made intolerable. I've spoken to so many doctors, people even who were basically told, you know, speaking out against things like lockdown policy early on in 2020, and they were basically told, you know, other health professionals can speak out on this subject, saying the approved line. If you speak out again, you're going to be sacked. I was told that again and again. People, you know, or your life's just going to be made so difficult, you're not going to be able to stay in work. We know that that's what happens. How do we stop that from happening? How do we stop anybody ever feeling that it wasn't the right thing for them and everyone else to say, I think something bad is happening to this child. Can we help them?
Well, what we need to do is, and this is one of the recommendations of mandatory reporting, is to make the reporting to an independent body,
Yeah.
not one superior, but there's an individual called the LADO, or the Local Authority Designated Officer, who the proposal is that that is the person that takes the complaint, and it's taken out of the organisation to avoid the fear of loss of job, and that report can be investigated by somebody outside of the organisation who's independent of the culture that would prevent the reporting due to damage to the brand or the logo or whatever it is that inhibits people from reporting.
Indeed. And we know again and again, whether it's Jimmy Savile, whether it's grooming gangs in Rochdale, the children have often spoken out. People know it's all happening. Everyone knows it's happening. Everyone goes, why did no one speak out? They did. They did again and again and again. Thank you for the wonderful work you do. Peter Garsden, he's a solicitor and president of the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers.